Good morning. Brother Mike warned us that if we stood behind the pulpit, that because of his height versus mine, I might not be seen. So if it's okay, I'll stand right over here. Real quickly, 1965, my mom arrived in the United States as an exchange nurse. And she arrived in Houston, Texas, and they were going around trying to find a place where they could worship. And this one lady, and her name was what we called Lola D. Lola in the Philippines is grandmother. Lola D actually went to the different places and found some of these nurses. And one of these nurses was my mom. And she helped my mom get established in a church very similar to this church in Houston, Texas. She mentored my mom from the day that she arrived all the way until she passed away a few years ago. Now, the interesting thing about this is that after she was exchange nurse, she got a chance to go home to the Philippines, married my dad. I was born. I arrived at the church at the age of 3, didn't speak any English, but all you could hear was my crying in the nursery for years and years and years. But I look back at that when I walked into the church today, and I remember that church was very similar to this. And as I look into the crowd, it was the same folks. And so many, many years now, I really feel kind of at home because this was the setting that I first was introduced to. Yes, Tara and I have lived most of our lives in Houston, Texas. She was born in New Hampshire, and I was born in Iloilo City, and I arrived when I was 3. We lived there in Houston and went to school there at HBU and actually served on staff at several churches, one of them being at Second Baptist Church. And then God called us to move to Seattle, south of Seattle, to a town called Puyallup. And I served as a children's pastor there for 3 years. Then after that, God called us to do something really interesting. And I was talking to one of the Sunday school classes this morning. It was kind of like a Jonah moment, meaning God calls you, and what do you do? And it was right back at Iloilo where we landed. We've been there now for 7 years. And some of the ministries we just want to share with you this morning, one of the things I want to say is influence. I was influenced at 3 and stayed at that church for 17 years. And I had a chance to go back to the Philippines, and now we have an opportunity to share the gospel of Jesus Christ and to share the Great Commission and have influence, to handle kids on a campus that Brother Mike spent some time and shared the gospel there too. So we have about 1,000 kids that we minister to. And one of the goals that I do is, just like my son is in the nursery and my daughter was in the youth this morning, is helping small churches develop a children's ministry that's long-lasting. Because they don't have curriculum. So we go there and we give them free curriculum that is not disposable. And we teach them how to be sustainable and how to have a future in their churches. That's one ministry that we do. The other one is a student ministry right on campus. On that campus is 13,000 students, 11,000 college students, 1,000 high school students, and 1,000 elementary. A university in the Philippines encompasses kindergarten all the way to graduate studies. So we go there and we help feed some kids on the ground because they don't have anything to eat. One thing I learned really quick is that they have siesta like in Mexico, and around 11 to 1, they just hang out and eat. Well, I used to catch some kids sleeping on park benches. So finally one day I went and approached them and I said, "Why are you sleeping? Is it because it's too hot?" And he says, "Yes." I said, "Is it because you're trying to just get away from school?" "Yes." And then they said, "There's another reason." And it was the first time I had ever heard this. The reason why they sleep from 11 to 1 is so that they can pass the hunger. I'd never heard that before. They actually slept through that time so that they didn't have to think about eating. And when they would wake up at 1, they would go back to class. So one of the things that we do is when we run into those kids, we just give them something to eat. And then you are then becoming an influence to them. The other thing is that I actually coach there in college women's fast pitch. And as I've traveled the country, grateful by the grace of God, we have won some national championships. And it's been amazing, but it's allowed me really to travel the country and to really minister to coaches. Because you might know this evangelist. His name is Billy Graham. And he made a comment that I had never heard before, and it was this. The biggest influence in a kid's life is his coach. Because if you notice it on a Saturday, if your kids go out there or your grandkids, the coach will say, we have practice on Saturday. And then mom and dad or grandma or grandpa says, let's go do something. Guess what little Tommy's going to want to do? The influence of a coach is huge. So now I travel with the affiliation of FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and we go around and minister and share the gospel to the coach. Because if you can share it to the coach, look at the influence he or she has to all the kids that play. Changing a country in kids. And then another ministry that's really come close to our heart lately is something that I'm going to turn over to my wife. And she has had the opportunity to work with this brand new ministry, and you are filtering and you're hearing about it here in the States. Well, it's awfully prevalent in the Philippines, and it's called human trafficking. And for just a second here, I'm going to turn it over to my wife, and she's going to share a little bit of what's going on there.
One of the areas that we've recently gotten involved in the last year, like my husband said, is the area of human trafficking. About less than a year ago, I was invited to view a documentary called Nefarious. I don't know if many of you have heard of it. It was put out by Exodus Cry and International Justice Mission. And it's a video that talks about human trafficking in Europe, in Asia, in the UK, all around the world. And through that whole connection, after that video showing, a group of other missionaries and some volunteers kind of got together, and it was those of us that had a heart to move further with the ministry, and we were just kind of touched by just the movement of it all and just what was happening and the injustice of it all that we'd not been aware of until we'd been exposed to it. And so what we did is we got together and thought to ourselves, what can we do within our realm in this area since trafficking is so prevalent in Asia? And so we got a hold of a ministry called International Justice Mission. They're pretty active in the U.S. and all throughout the country, all throughout the world. And they have an office in Cebu, which is in the Philippines. It's about an hour south of us. And they have about 40 staff. A lot of them are foreigners. They have attorneys. They go in and do the actual trafficking busts in the bars. And so we had them come to our city and train about 15 of us that were wanting to get involved and really make a difference in this area. And it was kind of a train-the-trainer situation. They came to train us so that we could go out and train others. And what we've done is now we go into the poorest areas. For example, there's an area in our city, it's called Calahunan. It's the city of Calahunan. And basically it's a trash dump. And it's where people live in the trash dump, at the trash dump site. And they even call it the Smoky Mountains because when they burn trash, the smoke rises from the mountains. And, you know, it rises from the trash site where they're burning the trash. And that's kind of how they refer to it as the Smoky Mountains. You know that's the trash dump site. And so what happens is a lot of the trafficking victims are taken from the poorest areas. For example, in that area where somebody knows they can go and promise a future to a family that has no money by luring them in, whether it's through domestic helper work or anything like that, they know that they can target those victims because basically they're desperate. And so we went into this poor area for our first training. And we brought all these youth in, particularly girls, from the ages 10 all the way up, and we talked to them about trafficking. We explained to them what it was. We told them about the push and pull factors, what to expect. We talked to the parents, just letting them know if somebody comes to you and they say, look, I'll give you $3,000. There's this great job offer, and they don't have credibility as far as a phone number, a website. You know, they can't give you legitimate contact information and resources. We just kind of gave them the information as far as this is what to look out for. These are red flags. And we didn't know how it was going to go. We just did the training and we prayed for the best. And after the training, we had several girls come up to us, young girls, 12, 13, and say to us, I'm so glad you shared this information with me because I've been approached for something like this before. And we had a parent come up to us and say, somebody offered my daughter a job and it didn't all line up. And so I told them no. And now I know. And so we just kind of spread the word among this young group of kids, letting them know what trafficking was, letting them know how to look out for it, what they could do to prevent if they saw their friends or family members becoming being lured in by something like that. And our goal is to go around to the different poorer parts of town and also to within the schools and hopefully get the churches involved. We're trying to spread the word right now just to raise awareness. That's our first step, is awareness and advocacy. And the second thing we're doing with human trafficking is we're doing research. We're talking to the government about statistics, because what's happened is this office in Cebu that does a lot of the rescues has said that a lot of the victims have come from our island. And so we know in our heart that it is happening within our city. And one of the hard things in the Philippines or in any third world country is that there's dire straits all around. I mean, there are so many problems that a lot of times I think the locals might just kind of block it out or just not tell themselves it's not that serious, because after a while, there's so many problems you can only focus on so much. And so we had talked to people about whether they thought that trafficking was going on in our city, and they'd say, oh, well, I don't know. They kind of really wouldn't take it seriously because there's so many issues to consider. But as we've talked to the office in Cebu, the International Justice Mission office, they've said, no, we've had victims from your island. And so we know that there are people being trafficked from our island. And so our first step was awareness and advocacy. Our second step was research. We're talking to the government. And one of the things that's really been laid on the hearts of myself and another fellow missionary within our island is possibly long-term putting up a safe house on our island, a place where trafficking victims can come for rehabilitation, for therapy, for livelihood training. Because one of the things that we've really realized since we've been overseas is that just as much as we need to meet the spiritual needs of people, we also need to meet their practical needs. You know, you can tell them about Jesus, but if they're hungry and starving, how much attentiveness are they going to have? And so we really want to share Christ with them, use that as a form of discipleship, and then hopefully do livelihood training, help them reestablish themselves, help them find a place to live to where they can live on their own in an industry that is not so damaging and so destructive. And so we're really at the very beginning stages of this trafficking ministry. We feel like the sky's the limit and that God can do anything he wants to do. So right now we're doing the awareness and advocacy, we're doing research, and long-term wise or in the future, we'd really like to see God open the doors for us to have a safe house and see if he works that out. And we believe he's leading us in that direction. And so that's where our focus is right now. Oh, and then also our children and my daughter, I didn't even share with her that I was going to share this, but one of the reasons we're passionate about this is because both of our children are adopted. We lived in the U.S., in Houston, and we adopted our first daughter, Callie. We got her as a toddler when she was 16 months old. And then Caden, who's 3, we just got him a couple of years ago. And the reason that human trafficking really touched me, the reason that I really was, I don't want to say forced to movement, but really just felt God really throwing me into this ministry with a passion is because a lot of the people that are targeted are orphans. Because as sad as this is, the ones that don't have parents, nobody's really going to miss them. And that sounds horrible, but the traffickers know that if they take the orphans off the street or the street children, no one's going to come looking for them. And so we have a passion for it because our children were orphans and they lived in orphanages. And we are just real compassionate towards that. And we see the value in giving children a home and giving them love and influence and giving them Christ. And so we just want to take that from our own family unit and pour that into other people that are in need in that specific area.
Thank you. Influence. If we could leave a word with each one of you this morning. Influence. By the grace of God, God has put us in the Philippines to do these ministries. And all these ministries are part of influence. And as we ask you today that you would prayerfully consider our ministry as God keeps us there and grows us in many, many ways. what we really appreciate is the fact that God uses the body. It's just not all hands and it's not all feet. And you could be the hands here and we could be the feet there, but we're all one body. And we wanted just to share that with you because we know that God is a great God and He's got a purpose and a plan for each one of us. So we wanted to leave that with you. Thank you so much for allowing us to spend these few minutes and share with you.